It starts inside, long before anyone realizes what's happening. Not with shouting, not with chaos, but with a feeling, a quiet shift in the air that only a child would notice. Maybe you were 6, maybe 8, old enough to understand that something was wrong, but too young to understand why it was suddenly your job to make it right. You watch a parent unravel, slowly, quietly, invisibly. It might be the slurred voice of addiction, the sharp edges of anger, or the cold distance of someone who's alive but not present. And in that tiny moment, something irreversible happens in your inner world. Not a thought, a vow, a silent decision made by a small, frightened mind. If I don't hold everything together, everything will fall apart. This is where childhood ends, not in years, but in responsibility. You don't disappear physically, you disappear internally. You smile more, you need less. You become careful with your words, careful with your presence, careful not to disturb the balance that never existed in the first place. No one asked you to grow up fast, but your nervous system did. It learned to scan, to soothe, to predict storms before they formed. It learned that your feelings were dangerous and theirs were urgent. So your needs folded quietly inside you, tight as origami, hidden in corners no one ever looked into. And the world applauds you for it. You're so mature, you're so responsible, you're so strong. But no one ever asks the real question, at what cost?
Inside, there is a child you locked away so everyone else could feel safe. A child who learned too early that softness is risky and asking for help is a burden, and love is something you earn by being useful. This is not just psychology. This is the inner world of someone who grew up too fast, a place built on silence, survival, and self-erasure. And today, we're going inside that world, because the effects of growing up too fast don't disappear with age. They echo. They shape how you love, how you trust, how you rest or can't. They shape your entire emotional landscape, often without you even realizing it.
When a child grows up too fast, the world sees maturity. But on the inside, something far more complicated is happening. Something that no one notices, not even the child. A child's mind is built to explore, to play, to ask questions. But when you're forced into emotional responsibility too early, your inner world takes on a completely different job. It becomes a surveillance system. You start scanning the room before you enter it, scanning faces before they speak, scanning tones, silences, footsteps, breathing patterns. Every child is born curious, but a child who grows up too fast becomes cautious instead. And this shift isn't conscious, it's instinct, it's survival. Deep inside, your brain makes a quiet calculation. If I can predict the danger, maybe I can prevent it. That's the moment hypervigilance is born. But in your angle, we're not calling it that. We're describing how it feels. Your inner world turns into a radar always on, a weather station forecasting emotional storms, a place where rest feels unsafe and quiet feels suspicious. And because children can't choose safety, they choose role instead. Some become the peacekeeper, calming voices, smoothing edges. Some become the helper, fixing everything before anyone asks. Some become invisible, shrinking so they won't make anything worse. Some become performers, doing everything right so no one gets angry. And the saddest part? They think they're choosing these roles freely.
But the truth is this: children will sacrifice authenticity if it means protecting connection. Inside, this is what forms: a self that performs, a self that watches, a self that works, a self that never rests. And underneath all those layers, a child sits quietly, waiting for permission to exist. Their needs don't disappear, they just go underground, turning into guilt, hypersensitivity, independence that feels like armor, and a fear of needing anything from anyone. This is the emotional blueprint created when you grow up too fast. Not because you were mature, but because you had no other option. And the problem is, that blueprint follows you into adulthood.
The inner world you built as a child doesn't vanish when you turn 18. It simply grows with you, quietly, subtly, invisibly, until one day you realize you're living a life that looks stable on the outside, but feels like survival on the inside. Here's how it shows up. You become independent, but in a way that hurts. Not the healthy kind of independence. The kind that says, if I need nothing, I can't be disappointed. People praise your strength, your self-sufficiency, your ability to handle everything. They don't see the truth. You don't handle everything because you want to. You do it because relying on others feels unsafe. Depending feels like handing someone a weapon. You struggle to rest, even when you're exhausted. Rest doesn't feel like rest. It feels like danger. Stillness was when the storms happened. Quiet meant something was wrong. Your nervous system learned early that peace doesn't last. So as an adult, you stay moving, you stay productive, you stay busy, because slowing down feels like losing control. You're good at love, but only one side of it. You love intensely, deeply, loyally. You know how to comfort, soothe, listen, support. But letting someone do the same for you, that's where things get complicated. Being cared for feels foreign. Being vulnerable feels unnatural. Being seen feels terrifying. You don't know how to receive love, only how to earn it. You sense everyone's emotions, except your own. As a child, you had to read the room to survive, so now, as an adult, you feel everything. Shifts in tone, tension in silence, moods no one else notices. You know when someone's upset before they do. You can spot discomfort from across the room. But when someone asks how you feel, your mind goes blank. Not because you're numb, but because you never learned to look inward. You apologize for existing. You say sorry for taking up space, for having needs, for being human. You learned early that your feelings were burdens, that the safest version of you was the quietest one. And above all, you never feel truly safe, even in calm rooms, even with good people, even in love that's gentle. Your inner world is wired for danger in environments that no longer require it, which is why adulthood, for people who grew up too fast, doesn't feel like a new chapter. It feels like an extension of childhood, but with higher stakes, bigger responsibilities, and a deeper loneliness that's hard to explain.
From the outside, you look composed, high-functioning, stable, the kind of person people depend on, because you never collapse, never lose control, never make things difficult. But your inner world tells a different story. Deep inside, there is a quiet sadness you can't name. It doesn't scream, it doesn't rage, it just sits there, like a room you keep the lights off in. A room full of moments you never had time to feel. And you learn to live around that room the way people live around a locked door. You carry grief you never allowed yourself to experience. Not the dramatic kind, the subtle, invisible kind. Grieving the childhood you didn't get, grieving the softness you weren't allowed, grieving the protection you needed but never received, grieving the version of you that should have existed but never could. It's a grief that hides under your achievements, your independence, your emotional discipline.
You want connection, but fear what comes with it. You crave someone who sees you, someone who asks how you are before they ask how they are, someone who doesn't love you for what you do, but for who you are underneath the performance. But when people get close, your inner world flinches. If they see the real me, they'll leave. So you stay half open, half guarded, giving just enough to maintain the relationship, but never enough to risk disappointment. You long to rest, but resting feels unnatural. There's a part of you that wants to lie down, to let someone else carry the weight for once, to not be the strong one, to finally exhale. But the moment you try, your mind snaps back into alert mode. Get up. Don't relax. Something might go wrong. Your inner world never learned the difference between calm and danger. You dream of being taken care of, but don't believe you deserve it. You fantasize, secretly, about someone showing up for you the way you showed up for everyone else.
There's a moment, sometimes at 22, sometimes at 35, sometimes at 60, when something inside you cracks. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for a truth to slip through. I'm not strong, I'm scared, and I've been scared for a very long time. And suddenly all the pieces start to make sense. You realize your maturity wasn't a gift, it was a response. You didn't grow up fast because you were naturally wise. You grew up fast because life demanded it. You weren't responsible, you were forced to be. You weren't independent, you were alone. You weren't calm, you were shutting down. And recognizing this doesn't weaken your identity, it reveals it.
Your adult patterns stop looking like personality and start looking like protection. Your workaholism, not ambition, safety. Your people-pleasing, not kindness, fear of loss. Your emotional numbness, not composure, self-defense. Your hyper-independence, not strength, a shield. It hits you. The strong version of you isn't the real you. It's the emergency version of you. And you've been living in emergency mode for decades. You start noticing the moments where your inner child leaks through, the way compliments make you uncomfortable, the way kindness makes you suspicious, the way silence makes you tense, the way conflict makes you feel 5 years old again. These aren't overreactions, they're echoes.
Echoes of a child who learned early that emotions were dangerous, that needs were threats, and that being small wasn't an option. And the most painful realization of all, your strength wasn't a choice. It was a survival tactic your younger self invented because no one else stepped in. And now, that tactic is outdated.
It's been protecting you from dangers that no longer exist. This is the turning point, the moment you stop blaming yourself and start understanding yourself. Because once you see the difference between who you are and who you had to become, healing finally becomes possible.
Even if you look like an adult who has everything under control, your inner child never actually disappeared. They just learnt to hide behind your competence. And they show up in small, almost invisible ways. You feel guilty for resting. A normal adult thinks, I deserve a break. You think, I'm wasting time. Someone's going to need something from me. That's not adulthood. That's a child who grew up managing chaos. You check the emotional temperature of every room. Before you even speak, you've already mentally scanned. Is everyone okay? Is someone upset? Do I need to fix something? That's the inner child who learned that safety depends on staying alert. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. It's an instinct, not a decision. Your nervous system still believes that keeping the peace is your job. You freeze when someone asks what you want. You're great at reading others, but when attention turns to you, your mind goes blank because wanting things never felt safe. You crave affection, but feel uncomfortable receiving it. You want closeness deeply, but the moment someone gets too gentle, too loving, too warm, part of you panics because your inner child never learned that softness is allowed. You get quiet when you're hurt, not because you're calm, but because that small version of you was taught that expressing pain only makes things worse. You overfunction in relationships. You become the therapist, the planner, the caretaker, anything but the person who needs help, because needing help still feels dangerous. And the wildest thing? Most people around you don't see any of this. They only see the adult, responsible, mature, self-sufficient. But inside, a younger version of you is still trying to feel safe, still trying to catch up, still waiting for a turn to just exist without being useful. That inner child isn't weak. They're exhausted. And they're asking you for something you've never been taught to give. A life where you're finally allowed to grow at your own pace.
There's something important you need to hear. Maybe something nobody ever said to you. Growing up too fast wasn't your fault. You didn't choose responsibility. You didn't choose maturity. You didn't choose strength. You adapted. You survived. You became who you needed to be in order to make it through days that were too heavy for a child. And now, as an adult, you're finally allowed to soften, to slow down, to take the parts of yourself that were rushed and give them the time they never had. You're not broken for craving safety. You're not dramatic for wanting care. You're not weak for feeling tired. You've simply been carrying too much for too long. And maybe the real healing isn't about becoming stronger. Maybe it's about finally letting yourself be human. About letting that younger version of you, the one who held everything together, finally rest. If any part of this felt like your story, that means your inner world is louder than you realize, and it's asking for gentleness, not perfection. Thank you for exploring this part of yourself with me today. Take a breath. You made it here, and that alone means you're already growing in a way you weren't allowed to before.